Hi, so continuing my series about getting ready for the Grand Tournament. The first Age of Sigmar tournament I'll have been in. I used to do Grand Tournaments at Warhammer Fantasy Battle Days a long time ago now. And I've already gone through some of the allegiances that I am seriously considering and will have to make a decision fairly soon. I've done Legions of Asgore, I've done Legions of Nagash. So now it's going to be Maggotkin of Nurgle, which is, at the moment, the third one I'm seriously thinking about. So let's get into the Nurgle mood. There we go. And this is the list that I'd be thinking of at the moment. There are a few ones I've muddled around in my head, but, you know. So what we've got here is three big, nasty Nurgle characters. We've got Rotigus, we've got the Glotkin, which are both unique characters, and a Great Unclean one. The Great Unclean one, I would absolutely make the General, because there is no advantage in making either the Glotkin or Rotigus the General, and when you make a non-unique character General, you get a command trait. So, you know, that's there. Battle line would be a big unit of 30 Plaguebearers, a unit of Putrid Black Kings, a unit of Nurgle Chaos Warriors, so 10 Chaos Warriors there, 5 Putrid Black Kings, and a Chimera there, which is a Monsters of Chaos, and therefore is allowed as an ally in a Maggotkin of Nurgle. That's 240 points. So you've got 4 behemoths. This is basically the big nasty. So the way I was thinking of it in terms of the other armies, Legions of Asgore, I thought, you know, so that's got some firepower. That's got some serious firepower there. As well as some shock troops to take out anything that tries to rush that missile fire. With the Legions of Nagash, you've got solid blocks that you can keep replenishing. So maybe if you can get those quickly onto objectives and they have ways to do that, then you've got a way of being able to hold the objectives. And that's what it's all about. That's how you get your major victories, which is all you need to do. This is not like in the days of Fantasy Battle. I need to be very clear about this in my own mind, where it used to be based on how much of your opponent's army have you destroyed. And that was all there was to it. This is different. Capture the objectives. So these ones is gone for the big nasties. Okay, they've got 4 behemoths that can get stuck in. They could go in teams of 2, and just because I've arranged it like that doesn't mean to say the Great Unclean one would go with the Glotkin and Rotigus with the Chimera. It may not be like that, but it gives them the ability to smash into parts of the opposing army. The Plaguebearers, I mean, they're just fairly solid. They're fairly resistant to missile fire because -2 to be hit, while they maintain at least 20 in the unit. And by starting off at 30, there's a decent chance of that. And of course, they've got disgustingly resilient. So any wounds or mortal wounds that aren't saved, you've got 5 up to save it. Putrid Blight Kings, they're actually, you know, they're in there as something that can actually take some punishment. Now, there were different things I was thinking of. For example, if I didn't take the Chimera, I could take, and not the Blight Kings, I could take another solid block of 30 Plaguebearers, or I could take 20 Plaguebearers and say a Plague Claw so that I've got something to keep back there. With Nurgle, Maggotkin of Nurgle, like the other major powers of Chaos, you've got summoning rules. So the way it works with Maggotkin of Nurgle is, in each of your hero phases, you sort of say to yourself, okay, have I got any of my troops in my own territory? The answer is yes. You get 3 what are called contagion points. If there are no enemy forces in it, you get another one as well. And then you look, okay, have I got any in my opponent's territory? If the answer is yes, that's another 3. It's very unlikely you'll get the 4th for there being no enemy there, but that's possible. And then you also get D3 because of your Fecklin Narmal, which is a scenery piece, which isn't shown there because I don't know where I would put that. Usually in the middle by default, I suppose. And you get D3 for that as well. So you build these up. So it's very probable that by turn 3, I'd be able to summon in something like, I'd probably have enough contagion points for something like, say, 3 plague drones or a unit of 20 plague bearers. That will be, you know, potentially very useful, particularly for trying to capture an objective that at the moment's been ignored, or even for just contesting one where there's room for me to get close to it. So, you know, so there is that consideration. You know, I could have 2 units of Plague Bearers as my battle line and maybe popping another one in later on as well. Could be very useful. Chaos Warriors, just because they're fairly resistant to things, they've got a 5 up against mortal wounds. You know, and it's just a nice solid block. They've got the bonus to run with the Hornblowers, things like that, and it varies it a little bit as well. I don't just want Plaguebearers all over the place. But in terms of this particular list, you know, the Chimera's got a very nice shooting attack, and it's, you know, fairly fast, and it can get stuck into anything weak that's on the periphery. Maybe a small, fast unit that's making for an objective, and the Chimera can just go into it, hopefully, and beat it up. You've also got in there, of course, the equivalent of like 6 wizards, because each of those characters is a double wizard, so 6 spells that I'll be able to try and cast. I mean, even against magic heavy armies, that also gives me a lot of unbinding, as well as a lot of casting as well. A good chance of getting something through. The main weak link in it, arguably, is the Black King, because although they can dish out a lot of damage when they get stuck into something, they've got quite a few wounds. It's not like they're going to die easily, but at the same time, they haven't got anything particularly protecting them. So, you know, but it is something I'd be happy with. I'd be happy to take something like this. So if we take a look at the Great Unclean one, so this would be the general, as I say. I would take, and there's various options you can take with this. I would take the Doomsday Bell as I have on the one I'd take at the moment. Anyway, that means that any Nurgle units within 7 inches of him in the movement phase, at the start of the movement phase, it doesn't matter if he moves away, can have +3 to their movement characteristic. So he can use them to shift things up fairly quickly, grab objectives a bit easily. Again, with the coming back to the magic, one thing I definitely want in the first turn is, of course, you want movement to try and get to those objectives. He is one source of that movement. On the Cycle of Corruption, if I don't happen to roll a 1, then I would certainly want to use Foul Regenesis to attempt to at least get it to that one, because that gives you another 2 inches as well. Won't help the Chimera, but that's fine. I'll keep them out of range anyway, because that, of course, is not a Nurgle unit, but everything else is. Onto Rotigus, which is also a type of Great Unclean one, but it's a named character version. So this is quite interesting. It doesn't have a shooting attack, but it's got decent melee attacks in there. And of course, the benefit of taking this over just another Great Unclean one is he gets his own spell. So you don't have to worry about the fact that they'll both have the same spell as each other. But in other respects, it can be quite similar. It's the same number of points as well. So it's certainly supposed to be about that. So decent combat character. In fact, a very decent combat character. I mean, going back to the Great Unclean one, I played a game recently with a 1,000 point Nurgle army, and I made a proper, I cannot describe to you how much of a mess I made of it. And I cannot to this day understand what my thought process was. I don't get it. But suffice to say, I was up against a Cinch army, and I engineered the complete loss of my entire army. And I mean my entire army, apart from the Great Unclean one. And in return, I did what I may have done 2 wounds of damage. It may have just been 1. I didn't kill anything with the whole rest of my army. I don't even want to talk about it. But I mustn't forget it, because I can't ever do anything that stupid again. But the point was that this Great Unclean one finished off against the army, finished off a unit of Flamers. All right, that's not too difficult. That's a bit of an hors d'oeuvre to begin with. Then he finished off a unit of 6 Tangor Enlightened, and that's big. That's 24 wounds and big beefy unit. Finished them off. Finished off a Changeling, which is a character. The game ended there. Had it not ended, I kid you not, this Great Unclean one would have gone on to wipe out that entire Cinch army single-handedly. You know, he'd given it his best shot against it with all his most powerful troops, and I'd taken them all out, and he'd lost me half the wounds on it. All that was left was a general, which wasn't going to do much to me, and 2 units of 5 Chaos Warriors. No problem at all. So, one Great Unclean one is a very beefy prospect. A Great Unclean one with a named Great Unclean one. And then, of course, the Maggotkin, which is even better, really. Even more wounds as well. That's frightening. That would frighten me. And now I know there are some Nurgle players who take 3 Great Unclean ones, for example. I think some of them may even use the battalion where they... Because you think to yourself, well, there's a problem with that is they've all got that spell, the Plague Wind spell. But that battalion ability allows them to... Only one of them can cast it still, but it allows it to combine the effects of it. Because it does like D3 damage, but this makes it do 3 D3 damage. As long as they're all in range, they have to stay together. But then that's more points. But, you know, I've seen a list that did very well in the tournament. There was just 3 Great Unclean ones and 3 units of Plaguebearers. And that was it. That was it. But no, I mean, like I say, I'm not just about a strong army. I want a strong army, but it also needs to be one I'd like. And I like some variety. So, I would quite like this one. Then onto the Plaguebearer. So the Plaguebearers are very, very useful, as I say, at holding an area. And they can do it in one of 2 ways. I mean, I did a battle report of a game, 1500 point game, where I used them in just before Christmas against the Seraphon army. And they have 2 benefits, and that was only a unit of 20. One, they're fairly resilient, like literally disgustingly resilient. So they've got 5 up save there, plus 5 up disgustingly resilient. Cloud of Flies means that as long as you've got at least 20 of them, they're -2 to be hit in the shooting phase and -1 in combat. If it drops below 20, then they're still -1 in the shooting phase. If you keep them near a Nurgle demon hero, and I've got 3 of them, one of them's bound to stick to it, I can re-roll saves of 1 for that unit. Now, of course, that would require that I have a save. Obviously, against rend units, that's a bit more of a problem, but always useful. You know, they're not going to do a lot in... And the other thing is, of course, actually, I should just point this out. The Maggotkin has a spell, which basically allows me to pick a friendly unit, a Nurgle unit, and increase the number of wounds it has by 1 until my next hero phase. So you do that on a unit of Plaguebearers, and all of a sudden you've doubled their wounds. So you take this unit of 30 from effectively having 30 wounds as a unit for your opponent to get rid of, to having 60 wounds in it. Obviously, when your hero phase comes around, you any models that you've got that have taken a wound will, well, there'll be just 1 obviously, would die, but that's okay. You know, you'll have still got the benefit from it. So, incredibly useful there. And of course, there is being demons, there is always the possibility that when they take a battle shock, even if I don't care about the battle shock, because at Bravery 10, if I only lose a few, it's like I don't... Normally, you won't even take the battle shock test because you don't need to. I will, because if I get a 1, I get to add D6 models to the unit. And it's such a big unit that if it is going to get a bit of a beating, it's probably going to take a few battle shock tests before it's whittled away completely. You know, every chance of rolling a 1 and getting D6 back as well, just to keep it up that little bit longer. So a great one for holding an objective. If you can get it quickly to an objective, movement 4 there, but as I say, be +3 with the Great Unclean one. And if I can get it, if I can either roll it or get it changed to the +2 movement 1 result, basically on the Cycle of Corruption, then they can effectively have 9 inches of movement. First of all, get them to run an objective. That would be the plan there. In terms of the Chaos Warriors, a similar thing. I really want them on an objective. You know, so, but again, they get +1 to run. A 5-inch movement, again, if they start close enough to the Great Unclean one, they don't have to be wholly within 7 inches, just within 7 inches. Then they effectively could have 8-inch movement, but again, +1 for running. So again, get them running somewhere useful and just try and hold it up for a bit. I think it needs to be 10 really. You would think about 2 units of 5 if it was just holding objectives. But I mean, I had that idea knocked out of me by playing against that Siege player who is small unit of 3 flamers, just destroyed them. And I just thought, well, I mean, that's an extreme type of unit for doing something like that. But just better to have the block of 10 really. And Great Unclean one has a spell where you can potentially bring some back. Well, not bring some back as such, but heal wounds. And they've got 2 wounds each. So you could do that. Or the Maggotkin, as I say, if they're under the most threat, the Maggotkin could try and use his spell to give them an extra wound. So they've got 3 wounds each. So there's possibilities there as well. They are better in combat as well as the Plaguebearers. So if I felt that some damage needed to be done. In other words, if I saw something really nasty coming my way, towards an objective, I probably want to get the Plaguebearers there just to hold still. But for the Chaos Warriors, if it was against something where they might actually be able to do some damage back and potentially more damage back than they take, the Chaos Warriors may be the ones for that. And then, of course, the Blight Kings, they are actually quite good in combat. So 3 attacks each, 3s and 3s, hits and wounds. There's no rend, but if they score a 6 to hit, then you know, that becomes D6 hits. So they can actually get they can do quite a bit of damage. It's amazing how much damage they can do. Also, you know, they've also got the +1 to run and stuff like that with their musician. And virulent discharge. So in the hero phase, if there's anything near it within 3 inches, you roll a die, and on a 6+, it'll suffer D3 mortal wounds. You're obviously not going to rely on something like that, but you never know. And they roll for themselves as well. If they get a 6, then they get to heal D3 mortal wounds. So, you know, there's that possibility as well. So that's that army. It's relatively straightforward. It's like, you know, you've got 4 units in there that are like me smash, and the other ones, well, the Plaguebearers and the Chaos Warriors really trying to get themselves to objectives. The Putrid Blight Kings really would be in support of one of the nasty units. They'd want to hide behind things until they can get into charge range of something. Ideally sloping towards the Feculent Narmal, because then that gives them the opportunity to run within range of it and then still be able to charge through it. So that's the plan there. But, you know, I mean that's the core of it. I could, as I say, already talked about, could change a few things around with it. But I really don't want to go for just the 3 characters and then Plaguebearers. Even though that sounds like it the most straightforward, you'd have 3 solid characters for smashing things and then 3 solid blocks for holding things. Sounds effective, but it also sounds dull. Now, that's not the only possibility that occurred to me. There was another little idea. Not one that at the moment I'm seriously considering, but it is in the back of my mind. And it is this. Taking Archaon. Archaon is a big me smash thing. And his Varangard as well. I mean, if you have Archaon and Varangard smash into anything, ooh. The problem with it, of course, is you're going to have a much smaller army. You know, you can see here I've gone for a unit of Plaguebearers and then just 2 units of Putrid Blight Kings. I didn't want to be silly. There was no real benefit that I could see in being silly. And rather than going for 2 units of Putrid Blight Kings, going for, say, 2 small units of Chaos Warriors, which would be a nice cheap way of getting your battle line in. I still want them to be useful, and I don't now consider 5 Chaos Warriors to be that useful. They're not fast enough to quickly grab anything, and they're not solid enough to withstand anything either. But having a little look, so Arcane obviously got a ridiculous number of rules, 20 wounds, very tough, very difficult to kill, can deal out a lot of damage, is a wizard as well. Obviously he'd be effectively a double wizard, the Glockkin would be as well, so that's like probably what I would consider standard for 2,000 points. I mean, I don't know, it would for me anyway, because I quite like my magic. It would also be, and this would be part of my plan, a frightening prospect for an opponent. Because that's the thing, I think people as well can be distracted by absolute monsters on the opposition side and maybe move more of their forces towards it to meet it, allowing me, just in case, you know, people forget about the objectives, because ultimately what you're doing is fighting a battle. But the real way to win it, surely, and I say this as someone who's not yet experienced in these tournaments, but is focusing on the objectives. And maybe what I was thinking is it'd be a good way to focus people away from objectives, so I could quickly grab them and settle in, depending on the battle plan we're playing, and it gives you some scope there. But I mean, Archaon, we all know how nasty Archaon is. The Varangard are very, very nasty, particularly if you have Archaon in there. They'd have to be allies. Now, I've put them in green there, like in the Nurgle colours. That's only because you can choose at the beginning of your first hero, or in any hero phase, to give them a Mark of Chaos. I would, of course, choose to give them the Mark of Nurgle. Main reason being, as Maggotkin of Nurgle list, they would then get the benefits, and of course none of the disadvantages, importantly, from the Cycle of Corruption and all the other spells. But there are only 3 of them in the unit. They'd have to be taken as allies, of course. Like I say, they you know, you can give them the Nurgle keyword, but they don't have it by default, so they have to be allies. But that's fine, enough points for that. But you know, so many. I mean, don't obviously look at all those melee weapons choices. You sort of choose some, but I forget actually which one was coming out best when I worked it all out. But, you know, a charge with them, if you can keep them whole, they've got 5 wounds each, but they've only got 3+ save. And unlike Chaos Knights have got the rune shields, which means if mortal wounds come flying their way, they've got a 5+ save against it. These guys don't. That's confused me a little bit. Their shields do still give them a bonus. I mean, it gives them a bonus against magic. If any, you know, if it was magic that was the source of the mortal wounds, then it would, because any spell used against them on a 4-up they can ignore. It doesn't dissolve the spell as such, because it might be something that affects multiple units, but they can ignore it, and you know, Archaon has a similar thing. So from the point of view of mortal wounds with spells, I mean, that would be better, but mortal wounds from just normal units attacking or missile weapons, something like that, no help against that. So I would be concerned about people potentially focusing fire, but when you look at a lot of the armies, not a lot of people bring stuff where they would be able to focus fire. So it might be okay, it might be worth considering. My main issue with it all is not so much that I don't think Archaon and Varagard would be super nasty. I think they absolutely would. It's the 2 units of Putrid Blight Kings, because if I'm looking at it and I'm being honest, I'm thinking I've taken those to fulfill the battle line requirements, but I'm not sure how useful they would be. 1 unit, yes. 2, I'm not so sure. And that's a potential issue, and it's not like I've got much choice with anything else, really. So that is the main concern. It's like when you've gone for Archaon, some Varangard, and a big nasty character in the form of the Glotkin, then you're thinking... And of course I could step it back. I could instead choose to take a Great Unclean one. That would free up 80 points, which then frees up another choice. So I could turn, for example, that Putrid Blight Kings unit, or one of them, into a unit of 20 Plaguebearers. So there's all sorts of things I could do to vary it a little bit. So that's why I'm not discounting it so far. And as I say, it has that fear factor. So basically what I've gone through at this point is there's 4 lists. One of them quite nice with the Legion of Asgore. So you've got some missile fire that allows you to target and snipe potentially nasty monsters, characters on the opposing side. Legion of Nagash, which allows you potentially to use reserves to get onto objectives quickly and then just hold them with big blocks that can be replenished by your characters. The first Maggotkin of Nurgle list, which just has big nasties that can actually chomp while the rest of your army just goes around grabbing objectives. And then this one, which has a real fear factor about it. And with good reason. It's just that Archaon can only be in one place at once. And of course, I'd need to keep the Varangard with him, get the best out of them as well. So I'd have one part of the battlefield where I could reign supreme. The rest of it, even though the Glotkin is really nasty and would be supported by the Blight Kings of the Plaguebearers. So yeah, I mean, that it could well be really good. I mean, that's sort of 4 lists at the moment that I'm thinking I'd be totally happy to play any of those 4. There's none of them I'm thinking to myself, oh, is it strong or not? I know they're all going to be effective. Whether it's just a case of which is the most effective and can any of them be tweaked to make them even more effective. So those are the lists I'm thinking at the moment. I'm not ruling out other ones, but at the moment I'm not really looking at any other lists and thinking, yes, I'd like to take those to the tournament. You might be wondering to yourself, okay, what about, say, you know, your Skaven? You like your Skaven and you've just got Skaven, stuff like that. The worry for me would be lots of models. Taking lots of, and I wouldn't have to take lots of models, but I think I would. Well, I would. And the time taken to move them around in a limited tournament time. I'm not, again, it's something I'm not completely discounting. I'm not discounting anything at this point. The other thing is, I have sort of said by the end of February, and that's from my point of view, I'm doing this now, is 10 days time. I must have decided on the list, at least the core of the list, so that I can get models and be painting them. Because I need to, and I'm not quick at painting, I need to be painting them and I need to be able to play some practice games. I'm not likely to be able to get any decent 2,000 point practice games, but I need to be able to practice with at least the core of them. Hopefully 1,500 point games. Persuade some people at the club to do that. And go from there. Because I need to use it, and I need to use it a lot so that I don't, even though I'm going to have a roster to read through, I know what I'm like. Every now and then I put it down and don't read it when I should and miss something out. And I don't want to miss out on something. I don't want to have one of those situations where then following turn you go, oh, I had that rule and I completely forgot about it. And that, because it could easily have swung a key moment in the game, and I really wouldn't want that on my conscience either. So I need to practice with it to get these things in there. So anyway, let me know what you think, as I say, in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. Until next time, I'll see you later.